Hello, and thank you for joining us for our first talk of our winter lecture series. This is a new program series for us here at the DuPont Nature Center. We wanted to take advantage of the winter time where things kind of slow down for us to find new ways to bring interesting educational programming. The nice thing about this time of year too is since it does slow down for us is we get the chance to start to learn about what a lot of other people in our DNREC Division of Fish and Wildlife are doing and the amazing projects they're working on. So because of that, we wanted to utilize the series as a chance to connect our normal, center visitors with a lot of the other work going on across our division and people that we get to work with and know about. So while we do love the work we do here, our division is filled with other hardworking individuals doing really neat projects up and down the state that we wanted to highlight. So during tonight and the next few weeks, we're going to be bringing different topics each week concerning the work these men and women are doing to showcase the great things going around the state and all the efforts that we're putting into managing and conserving the environment here in our first state. Before we start the program, again, thanks for joining us. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. For all of you watching online, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll get to your questions at the end of the program. For those of you who are here, if you need to use the bathroom, they're right behind the walls over there. And if you need anything else, just let us know. So today we're joined by Paul Zarebicki, an environmental scientist with DNREC's Division of Fish and Wildlife in the mosquito control section. While I know the weather outside isn't exactly making us think about these pesky little insects, soon enough they'll be out covering our marshes, fields, forests, and unfortunately our front doorsteps as well. And our bodies, yes. So to learn a little bit more about these creatures and the work we do here in Delaware to manage them, I'm going to let Paul take it away.
Thank you. As Patrick said, my name is Paul Zarebicki. I've been with the Division of Fish and Wildlife for about 30 years now. Most of that time has been with the mosquito control section. So what I'm going to speak about today is mosquito control in the state of Delaware. We do some other things as a section, kind of some habitat manipulation and marsh restoration. I won't really touch on that today. I'll just get to nuts and bolts of actual mosquito control and the practices and what we do here in the state.
To the left. Sorry, it's still up here.
Oh, the cursor's behind.
Yeah, okay. Go all the way to the left and should get back up. Sorry about that.
Okay, got it. Now I can go forward. Okay, and I mean, this is just a funny slide that, mosquitoes have been a foe to mankind for as long as mankind has been around, and this state is no exception. There's a couple important things about mosquitoes and their biology that is important for everybody to understand and for us as agents that try to control mosquito populations. Mosquitoes go through a complete metamorphosis, kind of like a butterfly. So there's 4 distinct life stages for a mosquito. They lay an egg, they hatch out and become larvae, then they pupate and become adults. And one thing that is very common and is across the board for mosquitoes is in their larval stage, they are aquatic, meaning they need water in order to complete that part of their life cycle. In the summer, in the heat, some species of mosquitoes, they lay their eggs and within 5 to 6 days, they're an adult mosquito. Some of the earlier species that kind of hatch off even as early as now in snow pools and woodland vernal pools will be larvae for almost 2 months. So it depends on the species, the time of year, but the egg to adult phase can be as little as 5 to 7 days in the summer, but as long as a couple months with in the early spring and into the winter and into early spring. Interesting fact, only females bite, and they bite for a blood meal in order to get protein to produce their eggs. So it's not for feeding, it's just to get the protein from your blood to produce eggs. And some species of mosquitoes, unfortunately, can fly up to 20 miles looking for that blood meal, specifically salt marsh mosquitoes. So just because the mosquitoes are produced on the marsh here, if we don't do something about it, they literally could end up in town of Milford, 5, 10, 15 miles away and cause an issue. And just some kind of overall facts. In Delaware, we have about 58, maybe 59 species of mosquitoes that have been identified. And there's 2 different kind of main types, which I'll touch on a little bit later. It's a life kind of cycle trait. Some of them we call floodwater mosquitoes, and some of them we call standing water mosquitoes. Floodwater mosquitoes lay their eggs in an area that will flood. And standing water mosquitoes obviously lay their eggs on water that is already standing and stagnant. Of that 58 or 59 species, 19 species in the state are aggressive and cause humans an issue and are potential disease vectors. Some species only take blood meals from birds, some take only from mammals, some are reptile or amphibian specialists, and some are generalists. They'll get a blood meal from wherever they can in order to get the protein for their eggs. So out of those 58 or 59 species, only 19 of them are really a concern for us because of their mammalian or bird feeding habits, or both. And that kind of, those background points go into why or how we decide to control certain species of mosquitoes. Um, Obviously, the ones that are biting humans for a blood meal are a nuisance problem. Um, and some of them vector diseases that we're concerned about. Um, and the aquatic breeding habitats, like I spoke about, uh, there's so many different types. Any kind of ephemeral or transient water areas that dry up and reflood, or permanent body waters without sufficient predators for mosquito larvae can be mosquito breeding habitat. And that varies with the species and all throughout the state in different habitats: salt marshes, tidal wetlands. I'm not going to go over the whole list here, but dredge spoils, stormwater ponds, ditches, containers, all that can harbor and produce mosquitoes from larvae living in that habitat. And like I spoke before, depending on the species, some of them get blood meals from, birds, mammals, amphibians, reptiles, or a combination. And actually, some of those species that feed on multiple different types or multiple species or multiple types of animals are more of a problem for vectoring disease, honestly. Um, and like I spoke on earlier, some of them can fly up to 15, 20 miles to try to get that blood meal, but some species will only go 100 miles from where they're, or excuse me, 100 yards from where they're hatched. So that kind of plays into how we're going to control or where we know where these mosquitoes are coming from by just identifying them and knowing their habits. Um, the earliest adult mosquitoes we get here in Delaware and on Delmarva are spring species, and they'll come out as adults from woodland pools in about late April to beginning of May. And then we'll see adult mosquitoes in various forms and species through the first good frost or two in October or November. It seems to be occurring here, more recently. Um, some of them will bite all day long. Some of them are crepuscular, meaning early in the morning, in the evening, that's it. Some of them are totally nocturnal. They only take blood meals at night, and it totally depends on the species. Okay, so why do we do mosquito control in Delaware? Well, just quickly, organizationally, just so everybody knows, we are a state of Delaware entity that is under the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control in the Division of Fish and Wildlife, and obviously we're the mosquito control section. So as a breakdown, we are a state entity working underneath the umbrella of our Natural Resources Department and our Division of Fish and Wildlife. So from a control standpoint, we're not just worried about our effects with mosquito control, but obviously because we're part of the Division of Fish and Wildlife, we also worry about our other non-target impacts of our mosquito treatments and take that into consideration. So why do we do it? In a nutshell, to control the state's nuisance and disease-bearing mosquito populations for the purpose of A, protecting public health, quality of life, and economic interest too, especially in our coastal resort areas. And that is actually Delaware Code Title 16, Chapter 19, Section 1902A. So what are we doing when we're protecting public health? Well, mosquito bites itch. So you get irritation to your skin, which some people have severe allergic reactions, and you can get secondary bite infections from, itching and scratching those bites. So not only just the bite itself, but the complications of just a mosquito bite, even without a viral or an arboviral component to it, can cause health issues. And then there's the obvious kind of mosquito-borne disease threats, such as triple E, which is Eastern equine encephalitis, West Nile virus, St. Louis encephalitis, lacrosse encephalitis. There's a bunch of different ones that we'll talk about more when I get to that kind of the disease portion of this. But just to let you know, it's for pretty much bites per se or overwhelming populations of mammalian biting mosquitoes, and then secondarily and more importantly for human disease transmission. And then also for animals, we have issues with triple E in West Nile with horses. It's pretty catastrophic to our horse, our equine population here in the state. And then heartworm is also vectored by mosquitoes. And then get into economic impacts. Well, if you have, say, 100 mosquitoes on you a minute and you're looking to sell your property value is probably going to devalue because people don't want to live there. It's just to a point where it's unbearable. It can get to a point where mosquito numbers are stressful and can actually get to a point where they cause effects on livestock and their health and well-being. And then, obviously on our coastal resorts, we have a huge tourist industry. So, if you're getting covered with mosquitoes in downtown Dewey, I don't know how that would work very well with tourism. Not to worry about just tourists. People that live here and enjoy the state also like to recreate outdoors. And it gets to a point where if you've been in areas that are severely infested by mosquitoes, doing that type of recreation becomes very unpleasant. And then also outdoor events, concerts, weddings, etc. And here's just a picture of what adult mosquitoes can look like. And realistically, I've been doing this for almost 30 years, and there's been areas, especially along the coast in Kent County, where you will see salt mosquitoes at numbers, oh boy, that will, be over 100 a minute. And that is a lot of mosquitoes that are very aggressive and can cause a lot of issues. Huh. On the screen here, it shows me back on my slide, the first slide.
Sorry for
That's
the
good. That's
delay.
fine.
Is that good?
Yeah, I guess it was just lagging.
Oh, no, I think it's still
Like,
lagging. Yeah, sorry about that, y'all.
If you guys have any questions as I'm going, feel free, please to ask. Yeah.
I do. I live out in the country, as I told
Yeah.
you, and I've got two fiberglass outdoor water features,
Yep.
which I have water lilies in and
Mhm.
frogs, tadpoles, and
Cool.
things like that. And I go to Southern States over here and get these round
Yep.
discs,
Mhm.
and I think they're pretty effective. Like, is that one of the solutions for small areas like I have?
Yes, it is. And you're being proactive. And don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure they're called mosquito dunks, if
Yeah.
I'm correct.
Yeah.
The active ingredient in that is BTI, which is a bacterial-based insecticide. So, yeah, they're very effective, and that's one of the larvicides we use. And it's kind of a great larvicide because it's very target specific to mosquito larvae, and it's derived from a bacteria, and they actually have to ingest it. They have to choose to eat it in order to work. So the mosquito larvae eat it, and it actually destroys their gut system from the inside out. So yeah, they work great, and that would be the appropriate tool for your water feature.
I've got several apartment
Mhm.
houses, and I sit out on the deck. I'm a widower, I live alone, but I sit out in the evening, and mosquitoes don't bother me, but apartments are going back and forth, just seem to be breaking the skies with them. I think that they're getting, I don't have anything like that.
Yeah, and it may be of where you live also, and the larval habitat and mosquito habitat around you may factor into that. And it really depends on the year too in the state. In Delaware, we're on a coastal plain and very prone to flooding, tidal events, and rain events. And this past year was pretty dry. So water is an integral part of mosquito populations. In a drier summer, we don't see very many mosquitoes too. And you may be lucky, you may live in a well-drained area locally that, besides that, and you being proactive with your water features and having purple martins, you're doing yourself a great favor and helping us out because we don't have to come help you. So, and then, just by this picture, it's like, yeah, I mean, it can become annoying and very, very much a nuisance. And just, if we didn't do mosquito control in a lot of the state, I don't think it's kind of one of those things. It's, people understand what we do because we just do it quietly and kind of take care of things. If we didn't do what we did, there'd be a lot more pictures like that with people's arms covered in mosquitoes. And why particularly is it important for the state to do mosquito control in Delaware here specifically, besides the other factors I talked about? because 20% of the state surface is in tidal or freshwater wetlands, top 10 in the country. I think we're now 5th in human population density. I think this slide is outdated. I didn't double check. I should have. And then obviously we have 19 species of human or mosquitoes that bite humans, and 17 of those are disease vectors. So we have a lot of standing water, a lot of mosquito larva habitat, a lot of people in the state, densely packed, and a fair number of mosquitoes that can cause issues. So like I said, here's just kind of an overview of a mosquito life cycle and a general kind of outline here. So the female mosquito gets a blood meal, produces the eggs, lays those eggs either on dry mud that she knows will reflood or standing water. Go to the bottom right, the larvae will hatch from the eggs. They go through 4 instars or larval stages where they get larger and larger and larger, and then they pupate. And then after they pupate, they hatch out as adult mosquitoes and then complete the cycle again. And it's an interesting fact, but obviously male mosquitoes don't go for blood or look for blood for a blood meal because they don't need it to produce eggs. They actually will just, most of them will feed on nectar just for the sugar, just to sustain themselves. Like I said before, generally with, this goes for all mosquitoes and obviously for all the mosquitoes we have in Delaware, there's 2 main life cycles we break them into. Like I said, standing water and flood water. And this would be a standing water mosquito. So she has got a blood meal, she has got eggs, and she's laying that egg raft directly on the surface of that water. Yes, sir.
What's the lifespan? They lay eggs, do they perish or do they do it multiple times?
It depends on the species, but most of them only lay eggs once, you know. And that, like I said, there's so many different species to have so many different life not cycles, but life strategies that's not a concrete answer, but that's typically what they do. And they'll just complete that cycle over and over and over. Their life cycle in lifespan is not that long. You know, an average adult mosquito, month, and then they're done. So it's like, realistically, it's all one and done. So, and the second one, this is kind of a poor illustration here, but say on the salt marsh here, the areas below normal high tides and up above normal high tides that only flood on big like moon tides or big storm events, those salt marsh mosquitoes know to lay their eggs there above where the fish can access. So, and that was what we would consider a floodwater mosquito. And there's freshwater floodwater mosquitoes like a roadside ditch or a swale or a little pothole that dries up in between rains. Those mosquitoes know to lay their eggs in those areas and they will reflood, and those eggs will actually reflood and hatch out. And some of them can stay viable for 5, 10, 15 years as an egg in dry substrate. So, and that's why some years, like this past year, we didn't have a lot of adult mosquitoes, but unfortunately there was a lot of eggs that were laid over the course of the summer that are sitting there. So we have a large egg burden, as we call it. So when we do get some substantial flooding, possibly this year, the numbers will be super high. So
Those eggs, are they subject to, at some real record,
Mhm.
cold snap? Would they be destroyed by frost?
not all of them. It's same thing. It depends on the species. The more
Okay.
cold tolerant species, no, they pretty much, and the best way to put it is they're like in a kind of a state of suspension. So cold and dry doesn't really affect them too much. I'm sure there is a critical point for some of the species and some of their eggs, but most of them are pretty hardy and they can go through extreme heat, extreme cold, and extreme dry conditions and just sit there and wait for 5, 10 years until they reflood. So I don't really have a definitive answer, but most of the mosquitoes that have evolved to live in this state or habitat the state are used to dealing with this type of temperature swing. This is becoming less of the norm, but those same species of mosquitoes are still occupying our state. So these floodwater mosquitoes are able to kind of handle that temperature swing. So
Thank you.
unfortunately, no.
Thank you.
And then here's just a close-up picture of a mosquito pupae. So when they go from a larval to a pupal stage, they breathe they breathe oxygen. So even though they live underwater, they need to come to the top to breathe. So I didn't have a good picture of a larvae, but the breathing tube is on the tail part to make it more, more user friendly. And then when they pupate, their breathing tubes go to kind of the top and the head portion of them. So, but when you look for mosquito larvae, they'll die from shadows and predators, but they always need to come back to the top because they need to breathe air, even though they're living in an aquatic habitat. So basically, what kind of wetlands breed mosquitoes? Pretty much all types of freshwater and saltwater wetlands, natural wetlands. The main factor there is kind of lack of predators. So they try to pick areas that fish don't have access to, or other insects, or areas like that predators don't have access to. The larvae are better at producing mosquito larvae because obviously they're just not getting eaten. And unfortunately in the state, we've kind of monkeyed with a lot of wetlands. So changing the hydrology or the way water sits on areas and, filling or pollution can kind of cause an issue where there wasn't, where you lose your predators and you lose your draining and your flooding. And degraded wetlands overall kind of produce more mosquitoes than a more natural, healthy wetland. And then there's all kinds of man-made habitats. SWMB, which is a stormwater management basin or retention pond, as most people call them. At this point, because of all the development, there is about 2,000 of them statewide. I will say when they first started building them, they were more of an issue because DNREC kind of regulates that, and we all work together. We pointed some things out and some design features to kind of mitigate that. So over time, a lot of those stormwater ponds, just by design, hold permanent water and have predators, so they're not much of a mosquito breeder. Or they'll make sure the basins that are meant to flood and dry within 5 to 7 days, so the larvae can't complete their larval progression. So they used to be more of an issue. They're not as much anymore. A lot of people will call us and say, hey, I got one of these in my neighborhood, and 9 times out of 10, they're really not causing an issue. There's like the construction mitigated wetland sites, and same thing. We kind of put our input in and try to minimize mosquito breeding with wetland mitigation or restoration sites as much as we can. But obviously, being in Fish and Wildlife, that's not the only goal of those projects. We just try to help with design to minimize that effect. And there are container breeding mosquitoes, which all of us have containers in our yard. And yeah, buckets, boats, all that kind of stuff. So, dredge spoil sites, pretty much there's all kinds of larval habitat strewn throughout Delaware. We just need to go find it and quantify what is worth treating and what has larvae and what does not. And the one thing we can do as ourselves to help ourselves with this is there is one main species of mosquito that got here about 20 to 25 years ago from overseas, and it's the Asian tiger mosquito. And they are originally a bamboo mosquito. So in a bamboo shoot, there's nodes, like nodules and little sections. And if that breaks off, that little area can hold water on a broken off piece of bamboo. So that's what their native habitat was. And everything around here in people's yards, gutters, tires, pots, everything will breed these little mosquitoes, and they're an absolute nightmare. Before we had these, we had a pretty good handle on controlling the large native natural habitat populations, but because these Asian tiger mosquitoes live in such small habitat, and we all have a little bit of this in everybody's yard, they become pretty much one of our number one pest species, unfortunately. And it's one of those things, it's just a statewide problem, and everybody has a little bit of the problem in their yard. It's tough to control these things. So
The colors, black and
yeah,
white.
they're really striking black and white. They'll bite in the day, and they usually stay from about the waist down. So, and salt marsh mosquitoes kind of have that striping also, but they were more a brownish color. And obviously, if you're inland 10, 15 miles from the coast, you're probably dealing with these Asian tiger mosquitoes. So I like to bring these species to the forefront because this is one we can all kind of help each other with. And we just don't have the manpower to go to everybody's house and check for everybody's container. And I've done this in the past and go into a house and dump out every bucket, shown the landowner, and come back 2 weeks later and buckets are flipped up over full of water. So the best way to handle this is kind of with some education. And at least now, yes, you know what this mosquito looks like. And if you see this, They are very aggressive and they do not fly more than 100 yards from where they're produced. So, you know, those larvae are within 100 yards or 300 feet of where you're finding those adults. So it's either your house or your neighbor's. If you go poking around, the best thing to do is just get rid of that standing water. We don't have to treat anything. So, um, and like I said, the Aedes albopictus, or the Asian tiger mosquito, they're native to tropical areas of Southeast Asia. Um, so they entered in specifically 1985, daytime biter. They are a vector of some of our mosquito viruses like dengue, chikungunya, eastern equine, encephalitis, and Zika. Very aggressive, like I said, small flight range, and they breed in everybody's backyard. So pay attention to these, and if you see them, try to help us by helping yourself. Here's just some other photos. Those corrugated downspouts on the bottom right, instead of a straight piece of PVC, those little corrugations will hold water. And I mean, they're, like I said, they're used to, the larvae are used to living in a little bamboo hole. So for them, that's just warm and moist and full of food and kids' toys, bird baths. So anything you can think of, you know, rain buckets, tarps, wheelbarrows, boats, poles. I mean, even leaf pockets, shovels, pitcher plants, and seen them in things as small as a bottle cap before. So just keep that in mind. You have seen what larvae look like here with a couple photos. You know what that species looks like. If you find those and you see those wiggling about and you see them diving, just dump that water out and you can help yourself out big time. So, yes.
If they start in Cuba, they get equines and get these diseases in their system.
We'll get there.
Oh, okay,
so
I'm sorry.
No, you're okay. You're okay. Yeah, well, I'll get to that. And there's a long answer to that. So, and then, you know, here, like I said, for backyard habitat, just help us help you. Here's just another example of all the stuff that we need to be looking at for in our backyards. And mosquito larvae feed mostly on detritus, which is decaying plant matter. So the more these things sit out and the longer they accumulate leaf matter and plant matter in them, it's just more food for those larvae. So, okay, so we've kind of talked about mosquitoes in general, touched on the Asian tiger, just so everybody has a good kind of feeling for them and how they can help us help everybody by helping yourself. And what do we actually do when it gets to a point we need to physically control these mosquitoes here in this state? We use an IPM approach, and IPM is an acronym for Integrated Pest Management, where we use a combination of pest prevention and control methods. When we make decisions to treat or not to treat, we consider efficacy of products, the environmental impacts of that treatment, costs of doing so, staff costs, timing, time of year, staff resources, value added, you know, just all kinds of factors go into why we treat or do not treat a certain population of mosquitoes. And to make those decisions, surveillance of those populations and monitoring of mosquito-borne diseases is key for us to get data and information in order to make the best informed decision we can. And in standard integrated pest management strategy, the best form of control is non-insecticide controls. So obviously that's sustainable. If you eliminate habitat, like if you dump all the buckets in your yard, there's nowhere for larvae to be and you don't have any adult mosquitoes, it's cost effective and it works definitively. On salt marshes, we do some surface water manipulation where we take that water that kind of comes and goes in between large flood tides and consolidate it to where fish can get to those areas and consume the salt marsh mosquito larvae. And we call that open marsh water management. So we actually do physical manipulation of tidal marshes to minimize larval habitat and promote fish access and predation. And then, like I said, good water sanitation for residents and businesses. And police your yard, help us help you. And by doing that and getting the word out and showing pictures, you know, do some outreach and education, get that word out there so everybody kind of knows what they're looking at. And then also with like some of our state impoundments or water management manipulations with some of our upstate wetlands and stuff like that, we'll try to manage with other goals in mind some of our state impoundments to kind of minimize mosquito production with also, thinking about waterfowl and shorebirds and fish and etc. Another good non-insecticide control is, like you said, birds, bats, fish on the salt marsh. Anything we can utilize besides chemical treatments is priority number one. And if that doesn't fail, or they all fail, and biological control is relative, a lot of these mosquitoes have learned to evolve and they've adapted to overwhelm natural predation. So that's where, when we run our calculus of these populations and the risk factors of a certain species, we might get into chemical controls as a last ditch kind of effort to control the mosquitoes if needed. Like I said, from a chemical control standpoint, we either treat them in their larval form, in the aquatic form, or the adult form. We prefer to treat them in the larval form because they're concentrated. They're in their larval habitat, in an aquatic habitat. We know where they are. They're not flying around. They're easy to treat, more cost effective, more localized, and less exposure for less people because we're concentrating in a smaller area. Talked about the mosquito dunks. BTI is one of our main larvicide. It's a biorational. It's a bacterial derived. It's actually crystals and spores from distilling or fermentation of that bacteria that they ingest. Very target specific. Another larvicide we use are insect growth regulators, which is like a synthetic juvenile hormone, which tricks the mosquitoes to, when they get to the pupal stage, they kind of stall and they get stuck in the pupal stage and they never make it out. So they're available in the aquatic system as a food source, but they just never hatch out as adults. There's a new class that came out about 10 years ago, which is spinosad. And that actually, they found that it's a bacteria that they found in a rum. Making sure I'm getting this right. The chemical refs will get mad at me. If you know, a rum distillery somewhere down in the Caribbean. They found it one time randomly. It's a bacteria that it acts pretty much like a neurotoxin and is very good for killing mosquito larvae, but they could never find it again. But luckily they did. And it's kind of a natural, instead of a more chemical or more synthetic version of like a nor or nerve toxin for mosquito larvae. And we apply these larvicides as needed or as we deem fit by either ground, meaning by hand, truck, or with aircraft, depending on what we're wanting to treat there. And secondarily, if our larvicide efforts fail or we deem that population is not viable to be larvicide, there's always adulticides. We like to use that as a last resort. But sometimes Mother Nature just overwhelms us, and even we may larvicide a salt marsh event, and before the larvae can ingest all the BTI and die, we'll get another flooding event that'll wipe that chemical out, and then we've missed our window. So sometimes we just get overwhelmed that things don't work out, and then we have to use adulticides. And same thing, we use some organophosphates, which are nailed and malathion, some synthetic pyrethroids, and pyrethrin is a natural chemical from the chrysanthemum flower that is a natural insecticide, and they've synthesized it. Obviously, human synthesized stuff. And a synthetic form that is one of our main adulticides. And we also apply that by ground or air. And by ground is usually a truck, and then air is aircraft. And then, I do work for mosquito control. I am from the state and I am cognizant of our natural resources. And we have to be safe and kind of make decisions on when we spray these chemicals. They are all overseen and regulated by the EPA. The EPA registers these products and gives us an okay to use them at certain rates and certain habitats for certain species. And they pretty much on the label tell us that these are all registered and they pose no unreasonable risk to human health, wildlife, or the environment. I guess a lot of that is kind of, what's on the label, but the bottom line is I've been doing this for almost 30 years, and everything we do as a species, meaning humans, has some kind of impact. But me personally, I haven't seen a giant issue with anything that we have done. Yes, there's going to be some non-target effects. I'm not going to stand up here and act like there isn't, but we need to balance that with the needs of us as humans and the healthy environment. And me personally, I haven't seen a giant, like, big event where we've caused a giant issue from one of our sprays. I just have not seen it personally. So for me, that holds probably more weight than what the EPA has to say. And same thing, like when we're deciding whether we need to treat or not, first we need to make sure it's an adult or a larval problem. That's pretty simple. We have adults mosquito flying around, or do we have a flooding event? We need to go check for larvae. Is there disease present locally or regionally that we need to be concerned about? The species of mosquitoes, some of which we can go sample and find out it's not even a species we need to worry about. What their populations are, their flight range, their host preference, their biting aggressiveness, and potential for transmitting disease, all of which I pretty much talked about. So we'll quantify this, and we have thresholds that we have to meet before we even think about treating. And like I said, so in the nutshell, the first level of surveillance is dipping for mosquito larvae. And right here is me years ago, and going and actually sampling with a dipper or a dip cup, which is that white cup on that stick. And then we'll find mosquito larvae. And right then and there, we can speciate them, tell what instar, how far along they are, and see what density they are population-wise. So that's, in a nutshell, how we check for mosquito larvae. For adults, we either set traps, which right here is a CO2 baited light trap, where carbon dioxide, which is one of the gases we emit, is actually used as bait to attract female mosquitoes. They hone in on our heat, our CO2, and some of the chemicals emitted from our skin and our sweat. So they'll come to that, we'll catch them overnight, and we'll count them and speciate them and see. Same thing, we have thresholds for trapping to see what type of mosquitoes we have in that area and what their numbers are. And I don't think I have a picture of it, but the other adult surveillance technique is landing rates. It's pretty crude, but we'll go out to an area and we'll stand there. We'll count how many mosquitoes land on us within a minute and what type they are. And then we also obviously have public service requests that come in because we are a public service and we are a state entity. So we'll get calls in from the public letting us know that they're getting bit by mosquitoes. Now, not all those calls are from mosquitoes. It might be flies or, no CMs or whatnot, but we'll go vet those calls and use that as another one of our data point, kind of as a third layer. So it alerts us to maybe a problem we didn't know about more than anything else. We'll see a cluster of calls come out and we'll send an inspector out to go see what's going on there. It kind of gives us a heads up to some of the things that we just can't stay on top of everything and every rain event and every flooding event ourselves. So, and then we as a section get about 2,500 calls a year, and that is based on an average year. On a drier year, I didn't pull the numbers, but I'd say this year we probably got half of that. And a year like, was it 2018 or 2008, where we had 20 inches of rain, it might have been quadruple that. So it's very dependent on the year and the rainfall on how many public service requests we get a year. And it's nice, we've kind of had this system that we've mapped these, and over the years we can see trends and stuff like that and kind of see how things are developing, and it helps us to make better decisions when we're controlling mosquitoes. So I guess here's a good comparison. I'd say the map here is on 2017. That was about an average year. And here's 2018, which was a year to, I guess it was 2018, where we had 20 inches of rain through the mosquito season. So you're looking at number wise, I mean, you could just see the difference in the number of calls in the same geographic area from one season to the next. So you're going from an average year to a way above average year precipitation wise.
What's the different colors?
And I didn't specify that, but for this is our kind of our internal database. No, but the purple is a call coming in from a constituent. I think the green is like a special event, like a wedding or a concert. And then the orange is like a larval complaint. So if somebody says, "Hey, I got standing water in my yard, will you come check it out?" So,
Thank you.
Yep. And then I guess the other part of the surveillance kind of matrix is us checking for mosquito-borne diseases. And we have We use sentinel chickens. We've collected dead wild birds in the past. We've used mosquito pools, what is collecting a group of mosquitoes and then grinding them up and checking for a virus. But we've seen here in Delaware that putting sentinel chicken flocks out in the field, strategically placed geographically throughout the state, seems to be the best for us bang for the buck. We use Rhode Island Red Cross chickens, which we found to be kind of most tame and least aggressive. We used a couple different kinds of chickens, but they're the ones that work best for us. We make sure they're 12 weeks or old before we put them out in the field for multiple reasons. The birds' beaks are trimmed, and for their safety and our safety, and are vaccinated against some of the common poultry diseases. And we get them out in early July, and we'll run them in the field until about end of October. And we have a partnership with University in Delaware with our ag campus for providing us these chickens. So what we do is we put them out in these cages, 2 to a pen, and we'll bleed the birds, take a blood sample every other week from one of the 2 sets of birds. So the birds get bled every other week. And we'll check that for various mosquito-borne diseases. And chickens are good for that because they are a sentinel for that, as in they'll get West Nile and they'll get triple E, but they do not get sick from it, or it does not kill them. So they'll get infected, let us know that it's in the area, but then the birds are still okay. So, and here's just a close-up of one of our chicken pen locations. And then we have technicians that go out and, like I said, we'll bleed them underneath the wing butt, paying attention to animal husbandry, and we'll collect that blood and submit it to our Department of Public Health, and they let us know what we have going on mosquito-borne disease-wise. And getting into diseases, this is just kind of an overview of that part of the equation. And just for some general background here, it depends on what virus and what is the source or what is the host for that virus. And each one of these are a little bit different. So on the left here, where humans are the reservoir, or we harbor the virus, that's for malaria, yellow fever, dengue, chikungunya, and Zika, where the virus stays in us, the mosquitoes will bite a human and transmit it to another human. There's other mosquito-borne diseases or viruses such as yellow fever, Eastern equine, West Nile, St. Louis encephalitis, Rift Valley fever, which are actually hosted in birds or other mammals and are transmitted by mosquitoes that will feed off of both birds and mammals and transmitted to humans that way. So they are reservoir hosted in a totally different organism and transmitted to humans. And in Delaware, these are kind of the viruses we need to be concerned about: West Nile, Zika, and chikungunya, which I don't think we've ever had a locally transmitted case, meaning that human to human in Delaware. We've had imported cases that have come overseas. Yellow fever, that's one of those things that we've kind of, through mosquito control, pretty much pushed out of the equation. Eastern equine, there's one type of mosquito that is not very prominent around here. It's more of a large woodlot northeastern tree hole. They see more eastern equine kind of up in the northeast. We do get it occasionally down in our southern swamps and larger forested areas, but not as regular as they get it up in New England. St. Louis, La Crosse, Western equine encephalitis, malaria, and dog heartworm. There's just a variety of mosquito-borne diseases that we have to be aware of and we look for here in Delaware. And like I said before, just some general health concerns with mosquito bites. Obviously, you get a bite, you're going to get irritation. Some people have allergic reactions, secondary infection, especially kids scratching it, and just mental anguish from getting overwhelmed with mosquitoes is that one portion of the human health concern. And then the other one is the mosquito-borne disease affecting humans, these are kind of the main ones we're worried about: is Eastern equine encephalitis, West Nile virus, and there are arboviruses in Delaware that are the most common. Other other ones in the country that we don't really see are Western equine encephalitis, St. Louis encephalitis, and lacrosse encephalitis. Malaria obviously is a worldwide killer. We haven't seen that in years here, and yellow fever. And, dengue, unfortunately, is still a big issue in the Caribbean. They have had some outbreaks in South Florida and in Texas because of a type of mosquito species that uh, is a good vector for that disease that handles that warmer climate that fortunately we don't have here. Um, Recently we've had chikungunya and Zika kind of in the radar here, and we've been lucky that we haven't had any local transmission cases, just imported cases. And same thing, we have some vectors of those diseases, but because of our winters and stuff like that, it hasn't become a major issue yet. The possibility is there, but it just hasn't become a large issue. And then, like I said before, triple E in West Nile horses is pretty catastrophic. And then, dog heartworm is an issue too with mosquitoes. So I guess I probably should put this earlier, but an arbovirus is an arthropod-borne virus, and there are viruses that can be transmitted to man by arthropod vectors, i.e., mosquitoes, ticks, fleas, and sandflies. So that's what we've been talking about as arboviruses. There's a couple different families, not to get into it too much, but there's flaviviruses such as West Nile, Tagaviruses, which are triple E, and I'm not even going to butcher this because I always do. Unani viruses, like Rift Valley fever, and that's something we don't see those very much, so that's why I'm not really too familiar with them. And just kind of to elaborate more on the transmission cycle, here's just a quick, dirty schematic of a human arthropod cycle. So the mosquito or the tick gets the virus or carries the virus or the disease and then gives it to a human. Like I said, this is dengue, urban fever, Zika, and the reservoir may be either in the man or the arthropod. So it may be the human has it, mosquito bites it, gets it, and gives it to another human, or the mosquito itself is carrying it and gives it to a human. And then here is the animal arthropod human cycle, which is more common of like triple E and West Nile virus, where the host is another animal. The mosquito, who is more generalist blood seeker, will bite that host animal that has that reservoir of that virus and then go fight a human afterwards and transmit that virus to them. Like I said, so that would be Eastern equine, West Nile virus, excuse me, and the reservoir or the sink for that virus is a non-human animal. And we're just infected incidentally by a more generalist blood-feeding mosquito. And not only are the mosquitoes, but here's a couple of our main vectors here in the state. Aedes aegypti, which is not common. Culex mosquito, which is kind of a standing water mosquito that's all around houses and containers too, which is kind of concerning. And then ticks here in Delaware, which we do have a tick program. We have tick diseases that are, spread by ticks, and then sandfly can also kind of vector some diseases too. As most of the animal reservoirs for these viruses, just generally speaking, for triple E and West Nile here, most of those are kind of stored in birds, and we'll see a spike in about middle of August into early September of West Nile and triple E. And what that is a lot of our, I guess the best way to say it is more songbird species or passerine species will start their migration from up north where they have that virus. They've stored it in their bodies and they bring it down here. We'll start seeing it locally here in kind of that first push of migration in late August and early September. So we'll see a spike in West Nile and triple E that activity as that occurs. I guess pigs are the reservoir for Japanese encephalitis. Monkeys are the reservoir for yellow fever. And then rodents are the reservoir for, whatever encephalitis is, and then the Russian spring summer encephalitis. So it just shows that different animals and different birds and different organisms are reservoir hosts for different types of viruses. It depends on what of these viruses you get. It's like, and what the illness kind of manifests it as. But unfortunately, for a lot of these viruses, especially West Nile, the symptoms are very general. And I think a lot of times it's kind of misdiagnosed here in the state. You just kind of get the same symptoms you would get any other viral, infection. It's just really, if you're in moderate to good health, a lot of people will probably get West Nile virus and not even have a clue they had it. And then triple E or Eastern equine encephalitis is pretty bad. If a human gets it, it's about a 50% mortality rate. So obviously that gets a little bit more serious. That's why we are very concerned about that. And luckily we don't get much of that here. So these diseases can be very well masked by their symptoms and sometimes misdiagnosed, or at least misdiagnosed from the initial onset. Now, some of the more serious ones like yellow fever and dengue, they give you hemorrhagic fever, and that's very painful and obvious. That's something that is very easily picked up by the medical community, but we fortunately don't see much around here. So what do we do to prevent any of this from happening? Well, we surveil for these viruses. And not only do we use the sentinel chickens, but we also get information from our Department of Public Health letting us know if any of this is occurring in the human population, and within HIPAA regulations, generally kind of where this is occurring and what time frame. So we use that, and that will kind of push our control to the vectors of these potential viral or arbovirus infections. So we may go from concentrating on a more nuisance mosquito species to more of a vector species mosquitoes once we know this transmission cycle has started or we need to start looking at it. Like I said, it just goes back to control of those vector species, which are eliminating any of the breeding grounds and insecticide treatments if we need to, personal protection, screens, bed nets, insect repellents, long sleeves, minimizing your pretty much exposure to mosquito bites and mosquitoes and ticks the best you can is a good way to not get an arbovirus. And some of them have vaccinations. So for West Nile, when it first hit the scene, 20 years ago, of course, we didn't know much about it. And now that we know, just so to kind of give you a visual of what I talked about earlier, it's like realistically 80% of infections from West Nile, which is the most common arbovirus here in Delaware, 80% of people have no clue they even had it, at all. And this is very crude estimates, just to give you a visual. 20% will get West Nile fever, which is the next level, and you're getting to severe kind of symptoms at that point. And then, less than 1% of that infections or West Nile infections become fatal, which is good because it is one of the most common here, but is not good for obviously the individuals that have to deal with that, because that does happen. We do have human fatalities every year from West Nile virus, unfortunately. So, here's just a couple, really we don't need to go over this, but these are some that are less common here. Yellow fever is found in West Africa, South America. Luckily, something we don't have to deal with. We just kind of know about it here, just in case something were to happen. We have some background information. Dengue, which is huge across the world. And pretty much probably one of the most common and most horrific mosquito-borne arboviruses on the globe right now. And same thing, we're lucky living in a first world country that this really does not affect us too much. And there's the distribution of dengue. It's pretty much all over the, around the equator and into tropics, and, pretty much it's all over the place. I don't think we need to really get into this. If you want to read over this, it's just kind of some more facts about dengue and dengue hemorrhagic fever. And if you get this and it progresses, it can be pretty bad, you know. I guess they are working on some vaccines for dengue. I don't know. You see, I don't know if we're 100% to that point yet, but it is being looked into. Zika is one that was in the news a lot, not too many years ago. It is an issue with pregnant women, so we're seriously concerned about it. And luckily, here in the state, the only cases we've had have been imported from travel cases, so we have not had any local transmission, which is great because that causes major issues for pregnant women and their babies. And then here's kind of the distribution map of Zika worldwide. And when it first presented itself, it had a spike, and a lot of these viruses will do that. They'll kind of get introduced and we'll get a large spike, and then they'll kind of taper off over time. And here's just another, I guess, slide of that. And with that, I guess that's about all I have. And like I said, we do mosquito control, but we also do kind of, as a section, we do wetland restoration and marsh restoration projects and assist with other things. So there's other things we do, but I kind of wanted to just go through the most important part of our program, which is protecting public health through mosquito control. And hopefully what I presented here helped and gave you guys a little bit more facts on what we do and information to maybe help you and, help us and keep us all from getting too many mosquito bites and getting sick from them. So with that, any questions? Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
And as I said, those I break one of them in half, a small water feature, just real little one, then the little bigger one gets a full.
Yeah, and it should say on the packaging what the dosing rate is, on the label. Yeah.
And the other thing is, I've got a lot of water containers in the bird beds.
Yeah.
But what I do is I check them every day. As I said, and if I see any of larvae, dump them right into the flower bed, push them all out, and then start with fresh water. And I can I've never seen, infestation that I have to worry about.
Yep, and that's
just dump them on the flower bed.
Yeah.
Then they become compost.
Yep, the best thing you can do is just do due diligence. And obviously there's some things like bird baths and stuff we don't want to leave dry. So if you just go once a week, police your yard and dump things out, you're helping yourself and your neighbors out and us too. So,
I don't need to be disrespectful.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You gotta go.
But thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
Does the mosquito have any redeeming values?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, they're part of the ecosystem and part of the natural environment, so they provide food for multiple organisms. So that's why we're not the elimination section, we're the control section. So we don't control the mosquito populations unless they need to based on thresholds of mosquito-borne diseases. So yes, they serve an ecological function. So, we don't want to eliminate all of them. We just want to kind of manage it, the best we can. So
a lot of the species of mosquitoes, or the males, feed off nectar. Are they considered pollinators in any way?
yes, they are. So there you go. I mean, just as an aside, it's like, yes, they're providing a pollinator function, and the females actually will take nectar meals too, just for energy, to continue pretty much living. So yeah. I mean, in that secondarily, they're pollinating. Yes. So good point. No, they are out in the field and they get bitten. And when they get bitten by the female mosquito that harbors that virus, it's transmitted to them, and we'll find that in our blood sample. So no, they don't eat the mosquitoes. They physically get bitten, and that disease is transmitted to them from the female mosquito through the bite. Yep.
Mosquito control school or passion about mosquitoes, or what got you into it?
Me personally, I was 16 years old and I helped with this is kind of I said, one of the other things we do as a section, I helped with a marsh burn with the mosquito control section, kind of as a volunteer. And that got me kind of, I'm from Delaware, born and raised in the state. I've always been on the water in the marshes and stuff like that. And just simple fact of integrating that into a job field. And then I went to University of Delaware for wildlife conservation with a concentration in entomology. So everything just kind of fell into place for me, and I landed in the mosquito control section. So. Yep.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah,
I
no problem.
appreciate it.